سلام او درناوی تاسو پس از خبر ګورئ زه زمریالی عباسین یم د افغانستان د سولې او انتخاباتو مسایل هغه څه دي چې لا هم په موازي ډول روان دي او تر اوسه پورې روښانه نه ده چې په دې دوو کې کوم یو هغه څه دي چې د افغانستان برخلیک تر ډیره ورپورې د یو واقعي راتلونکي په حیث تړلی دی. په همدې ترڅ کې بېلابېل هیوادونه او د نړیوالې ټولنې بېلابېل استازي هم په افغانستان کې حضور لري او په دې برخه کې خپل دریځونه روښانه کوي. موږ هم غوښتي دي چې په همدې لړ کې د فرانسې له نظریاتو هم خبر شو او د دغه هیواد له دریځونو او موقفونو چې د افغانستان د سولې او انتخاباتو په هکله لري په همدې پس از خبر کې په یوې ځانګړې مرکه کې تمرکز ولرو. د بحث لپاره سره همدا شیبه په کابل کې د فرانسې سفیر ډیوید مارټینن موجود دی چې دوی ته ښه راغلاست وایو. Mr. Martinon, thank you very much for accepting our invitation for this exclusive interview. I will come up with my first question. As you see, there are two different issues in Afghanistan going parallel in a same way for the future of Afghanistan, which is peace process and, of course, elections. What do you think? Let's come up first with the peace process. How do you see the progress in this era?
Well, I believe that the Doha conference with a good success. I believe the outcome statement was a good statement with some very good ideas, and that should be another starting point to go further, maybe in the same format, and maybe at some point enter into real negotiations.
How was the process that gone along this way? Because there were a lot of issues. For example, U.S. and international forces withdraw for Afghanistan, at the same time guarantee from the Taliban side and other issues. What do you prefer? Which part is very important for France?
Well, all of them are important because we care about our Afghan friends, and we do believe that let's say the 4 points that are being under discussions are equally key. Of course, our American friends and partners deal with some of them, and it is now up to the Afghan people to see how they can organize a new era with the insurgency and try to find the ways for a global reconciliation.
As we see, France was eager to play a role in Afghanistan peace process. We remind of December 2011 when France was hosting an intra-Afghan dialogue in Paris. Do you think that this is the another opportunity that France could do further, more for the intra-Afghan talks, or wholly the subject of peace process in Afghanistan?
So, we're friends. France and Afghanistan have been friends for a century. We are friends. We don't have a hidden agenda in Afghanistan. So if we can be helpful, if we can be useful, we will be delighted to help. We don't believe at the same time that it can be necessary to have several tracks, several ways, several spokespersons entering into several dialogues. I believe, and we are absolutely certain of that it has to be an Afghan-led, Afghan-owned process. Of course, our American friends have been investing a lot for years and years in Afghanistan. They have a lot of troops on the ground, so they have a particular set of interest in Afghanistan, and they have to have their own track. But again, if it is expected from us to help, we would be delighted to do it.
How does your country want to get involved in Afghanistan peace process? As we remind of 2011, while France was hosting an intra-Afghan dialogue there in Paris. So there are a lot of countries who are eagerly want to involve in Afghanistan peace process, countries in the region and the world. But what about France? Do you have any plan that you would like to host another intra-Afghan peace talks, or there was no dialogue at this moment in this regard?
So coming back to the experience you were mentioning, we believe it has been helpful because for the first time, Taliban and representatives from legal Afghanistan were talking directly. What we heard from it was that there was some progress, some good exchanges with sincerity and honesty. But I mean, it was up to the Afghan leadership to decide if it was worth keep on doing it or not. At this time, the Afghan leadership that it needed to stop. So we didn't insist. I mean, it has to be an Afghan-led process. So would we be able to welcome anything? We don't see that as absolutely crucial so far, because we have, our German friends have been doing a fantastic job along with the Qataris. I think what would be best useful for us would be to doing every effort to convince our Afghan friends to work with them. And if they ask us for some help, of course, we would be delighted to do it.
Let's come up for the recent progresses in Afghanistan peace process. And seventh round of talks between US and the Taliban and Doha, there was a massive progress and a very major issue of terrorism. Official report says that US now doesn't recognize Taliban as a terrorist group. What's your stance in this regard?
At some point, if you want peace, you have to talk to your enemies. So at some point, you will have to stop, provided they make the necessary efforts and the changes that we should expect. You will have to talk to them directly, and you will have to see them as partners for peace. So, at some point, you have to make progress, and to talk to them and to engage with them.
But what about France? Do you recognize Taliban as a non-terrorist group?
We had contacts with them in the past, as you mentioned. So far, we don't. Again, as I said, we don't want to multiply the channels, and we're with our Afghan friends, and that's all I can say for now.
And as we see and have analysis of Afghanistan war agenda, it was in a different phases, and it was called different types: the war against terrorism, peace building in Afghanistan, nation building, democracy, and blah blah. But now there are peace dialogue between the main characters and players of the war, the US and the Taliban, at the same time other Afghan and international politicians. What do you prefer to call the ongoing 18 years long war in Afghanistan now, after all these changes and finally this process of peace?
France was in Afghanistan immediately after the fall of Kabul. We were engaged in the naval operation back in the fall of 2001. In January 2002, 400 French soldiers came here in Kabul. Very shortly after that, 200 special forces fought with their American counterparts in the south. So we believed, and we still believe, it was a fair and necessary war. But at some point, I guess we all are certain that the Afghan people need a rest. They need a pause, and they need peace. So this is how we see things. But what I keep on saying is that I believe a reconciliation is possible, but according to the Constitution, this Constitution is your war bounty. This is the legacy. This is your legacy from the war. This is your common treasure, and you shouldn't waste it.
What has changed when we talk about Afghanistan war? What has changed that now it's about peace dialogue? It's a process of becoming under an umbrella of reconciliation. The things are much similar to the 2001, especially after 2005. But now the agendas are being changed. What is changed about Afghanistan war that now the issue of peace is doing everything?
Well, again, war can't last that long. At some point, you need to put a halt to it. What we can emphasize too is that Afghanistan has changed. It's Afghanistan who has changed. Afghanistan is stronger now. You have democratic institutions. You have an administration that works. You have a private sector now. You didn't have a private sector 18 years ago. Women have rights, and they express them. Afghan youth see opportunities in the future. So we believe that Afghanistan is stronger now. At the same time, you see that you will have you can have this war ongoing for a century if you don't put a halt to it. And we believe that this is what the Afghan people want now.
Talking about Afghanistan current issues, there is a coin with two folds, the heads and the tails. The heads is peace process and the tails is still election process in Afghanistan. But the problem is that there are a lot of technical, financial and other problems for the election that is supposed to be held in September, the presidential election. But the IEC recently announced that they lack the financial support. They are still striving with a lot of technical affairs that are still beyond every goal that they have been targeting. But what do you see? How can France play the role in if there is a likely presidential election in the country?
No rule at all. That's your business. That's your job. That's
but
your
financially,
democracy.
Afghanistan needs a lot of support.
You know, I see that the budget has now been established for the election. And coming back to what you were evoking about the difficulties, the technicalities, you know, in a way, I'm more reassured that they say that there are still problems to be solved, that none at all. That would be sort of worrying for me. Afghanistan needs fair and transparent election. The election has been reported twice. We don't see any reason to postpone it again, because again, if you were to postpone it, then it means that you wouldn't be able to have the second round maybe before next spring. That's too long. You don't know what the situation will be next spring. So we believe that the elections have to occur now. And it doesn't prevent, according to us, it doesn't prevent the peace process to go on. And by the way, a peace process can last for a very long time. You don't know about that. Maybe it will be a success, a quick success, and then fantastic. Maybe it will be a long success. You don't know about that. So if you don't have the elections on time, you don't know what you will be left with in terms of peace process. And again, it's
but don't you
to
think
the
this is more a viewer's perspective that you were talking about, less than the one who can financially support, is a part of NATO, is a part of international society, and a country which have come a long way, 18 years till now, and it still needs a lot of support, especially in financially. When we talk about election, of course, if there was no peace deal, if there is peace issue or not, but election is an essential part for this country, for the future of Afghanistan. How do you see, as a partner and member of international society, how could Afghanistan afford everything by itself? Of course, when it comes to hold and vote, it's belong to Afghanistan mostly, but other factors as financial issues, technical issues, it all still belongs to the international society, and of course, France is one of them. So what do you think about the support?
Again, you know, France has been at the side of Afghanistan since a century, almost. We keep on helping, investing, cooperating with the Afghans. We cooperate through the European Union, which is a big contributor to the electoral support group. So France does help financially through the European Union. But again, we believe that it has to be an Afghan-led process. And those who you should hold accountable
but
for
the
the process.
International society seems not very much interested in this issue of election.
Why do you say that? We work a lot on that.
They have been trying a lot of times. They said, we want reforms, we want technical problems to be solved, and a lot of preconditions that slowed down the process of election and all the preparations. So how do you see the support of the international society, the EU, UNEMA, and other involved characters?
Well, we've been supporting for the parliamentary elections. We drew some lessons. We worked very closely with the Independent Electoral Commission. We have a very strong and demanding dialogue with them. And so far, I see that this work is satisfactory. The job is being well done. And so we're mostly hopeful for the election.
Now, while we talk about election in Afghanistan, of course, security as the main obstacle and the main problem toward especially the voting day. How could it be changed in a positive manner that there would be a peaceful day for the voters on the particular day of election?
It's very hard to say. I know Minister Khaled and Minister Ondarabi are doing their best efforts to secure the elections, to make sure that the voters will be able to cast their vote in a peaceful way. But for that, of course, if the peace process was to go ahead, that would be extremely useful, obviously. But I don't have any guarantee for that, of course. How could we?
How do you see, France have its military presence in Afghanistan? As you mentioned, France involved in Afghanistan financial support in different sectors, including the election. How could we bring some positive changes for the security? Who is more responsible for this task?
Obviously, the ANDSF, obviously with the support of the coalition, and I believe they're doing a very good job. They're being very courageous, very professional. The momentum is on their side, so this gives us optimism, and we wish them the best.
I will come up with my last part of my questionnaires, and it's about overall Afghanistan scenario and the future of this country. We see many challenges ahead of the future, and all along the way there are hurdles: insecurity, technical problems, low economy, and other problems that you better know. But when it comes to the responsibilities of all the players and the circle of international society, how do you think that the international society feels some responsibility for Afghanistan, especially for those 18 years, which is called the so-called achievements?
So, the current NATO operation is the longest in the history of NATO. So you can't doubt the commitment of the international community towards Afghanistan. The only strategic interest international community has in Afghanistan is to be able to fight terrorism. For the rest, it's about friendship. It's about support to help the Afghan people who deserves it to grow, to be freer, to have more rights, and to have a steady and nice economic growth. It is about that. So on this, we will be with you, provided that our requests will be met. And these requests are protecting human rights, protecting women's rights, protecting the Constitution, all that. It's all about that, and making sure that terrorism is fought clearly and efficiently in Afghanistan, because it's also a threat for us.
Mr. Ambassador, I will come up with my last question of the current debate. I would like to know, when there is undescribed situation of the priorities, most of the time we face a lot of bad futures along the history of the world. And Afghanistan, as now we see, there are two different subjects: elections and the peace process, as we talked about. What do you think is priority now?
There is no priority. There is no necessity to choose between the two of them.
Why?
Because again, you need peace, but you also need a fair and transparent democracy. There is no way that you would be in a situation where you would have to decide that, okay, to favor peace, we won't have elections. It's just not true. That doesn't work like that. You will have to.
But the Taliban, as we were talking with their official recently, they say election means the sabotage of the peace process.
Well, you have a constitution. It's your constitution. It's your treasury, your common treasury. Don't waste it. Anyway, what is the option B? You will need a president who would be legitimate in 2 months. So
but the
if you don't
process
have
is very
elections,
sensitive.
Yeah, it's
very
not,
shaky situation.
What?
And you know what's going on
What is
under
shaky?
the umbrella of peace process in Afghanistan. Of course, Taliban have preconditions. Of course, the U.S. Is involved in some talks that are not clear at the moment, but they are usually behind the curtains, which is not clear at the moment. As Mr. Khalilzad, as the special envoy of the U.S. for Afghanistan peace, has repeatedly said that our priority in Afghanistan is peace process, and he at the same time was appointing to the government of Afghanistan to hold back the election process for the peace result.
Well, I mean, you're a free country. Afghanistan is a free country. You have a constitution. You have elections at the end of every presidential term. I see no reason for you not to have these elections. And by the way, I don't believe that neither the president nor the chief executive would accept not to have elections on time. Because what would be plan B? An interim government? Who would be the interim government? Who would decide? That would not necessarily be fair. And how would you convince everyone around that it has to be this person or this person to chair the country for, by the way, how much time? How much time? Till the process, the peace process ends? Who can say how long it will be? And who can say that it won't favor the Taliban not to have presidential election? You know, it's very difficult for delegates from Afghanistan to enter the negotiation and say, you know what, we want peace, but we want the protection of the constitution. And at the same time say, and by the way, we want the constitution, but we don't really need elections. This weakens your position of negotiation. It's contradictory. You can't start a negotiation with saying something and doing something completely different. It doesn't work like that.
We have had the government in Afghanistan, but we have never had peace, especially in these 10 years and all the 4+ decades in Afghanistan. But when now we talk about peace process, according to the Taliban, according to the US officials, according to the Afghan government officials, even, and all the countries and region and in the world, they say they talk about the progress in this process. Mm-hmm. But if there is an election, so as we talked about the Taliban stance, the US stance, it almost means a sabotage of the peace process, because they will say, okay, quit, because election is done. For 5 more years, there would be no peace process. This is my last question.
But if you accept that assessment from the Taliban, because I haven't heard it from the Americans, that's not what I hear from the Americans. If you accept that, then you're already negotiating with yourself, saying, okay, so they don't want elections, so we have to comply to them. No, you have your constitution. It's your war bounty. Let's make it, work. Otherwise, the whole system will not be balanced. So this would be my last message.
Thank you very much,
Thank you very much for your
Mr. David
invitation.
Martinon, the ambassador of France in Afghanistan. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
په همدې ځای کې د پس از خبر دغه بحث هم رانغاړو. تاسو په پاک الله.